Hey guys, the customer anteater's back. We did a TA on this guy like just about a year ago. He only uses it for, heavy tillage and maybe grain carting at harvest time. Harvest time's coming real close. So he called me probably midsummer saying, hey, the low side or the actual TA part of the TA is not working. The high side or direct drive is working. And I thought, man, that sounds really weird. So I went up and investigated, and sure enough, the low side's not working. So you pull the lever down for the TA, and it would still move, but as soon as you put any kind of load on it with the brakes or, obviously pulling something, it would just stop, well, that's really strange. The low side is mechanical, and it should always work regardless of having hydraulic problems or lever problems, like we had with some other customers. They had the TA cable seized up and so on. So she's back in here, and I thought maybe since we haven't really got a whole lot of stuff going on, let's just go ahead and do a how to split a 2+2 for a TA split. So I'm going to flip the camera around here and show you what we got started. Again, there it is. So first thing we had to do, we had to pull off the, he's got a big rock carrier on the front, and just throw in a stand up underneath. And this is one that I've made myself. And it just goes in here. We got a factory bolt hole right there where she's bolted. And then I just throw the chain around it. And these are angle irons, so that's supporting up and underneath. And pull it back towards those factory slot holes there. And then next on the list would be just obviously to get the oil all out of it. And this one was a little bit low, and she's got about, looks like 14 gallon out of it so far. And he did tell me it was a little low. So there's that. You got to pull the drawbar back, and then the drain plug underneath the rear end, and the drain plug underneath the transmission, which is right there where that bucket is. Okay, once you get the oil out, go ahead and pull the floor pan up. And if you've got one of these number 3 bits that goes on one of those hand impact drivers, works really good on your 3/8 impact. Takes good speed to those guys. They're kind of a pain in the butt with a big screwdriver, but with a little drill, they're pretty quick. Now, we don't really need to do a whole lot under the floorboard. Essentially, we need to pull the starter wires off. If you have a diff lock, that's what these 2 wires are. They come up in the floor plate. So just quickly disconnect those. To make it really easy, usually after I get everything disconnected, the starter wires and the hoses, which are over here and such, and a couple over there, these main hoses are going to stay in place along with the harness. I usually take a bungee strap or a short little ratchet strap and run it up to the steering wheel, and just kind of put a little bit of lift on them, and I'll show you what that looks like once I get to there. Then go ahead and pull your front bezel off in front of the cab. There's only 3 screws, 1 on each side and then 1 on the top, and I always put them right back in the hole. That way I know where they came from. Okay, next up we're going to go ahead and pull the step. Whoop, where'd it go? And the battery and tray. And some of them have, most of them actually have this little light and the battery cover down underneath. It doesn't have one on the other side. It just has the cover. It doesn't have the light. So anyway, next up we're going to go ahead and pull the drive shaft, and then we're going to expose this left side of the steering pump. We'll go ahead and get that shield off of there and start disconnecting odds and ends over here as we go. So first off, I've got to get this drive shaft, so I'm going to go get my 9/16 swivel. Those are by far the easiest, and I've got an extension to reach the inside with the swivel, because they're kind of a pain in the butt otherwise. Okay. And there's what she looks like without this side and the drive shaft. So we've got a few lines here we need to disconnect next. It'll be this guy up top right here, and then this guy here, which both come down to part of this steering system. That one comes around over there. We're not going to unhook any of this stuff except for this one. We'll unhook this guy and we'll pull the pump off, and that stuff will all stay disconnected all in one big mass over on the floor, pumping a few lines. That big shield on the other side also has that oil filter on it. There it is. And it's just bolted 3 bolts underneath, 2 on top. This one's kind of a pain to get to. Not terrible, but kind of a pain. Anyway, those are just connected with these two hoses here and those bolts, and that big shield's going to slide over out of the way. And then the suction tube and the hydraulic pump underneath, that's all just going to sit right over here as we do the rest of our work. Battery and step over here, same thing as the other side, just reversed as to this side. Okay, there it is. Like I said, she just folds up out of the way. Same thing with the hoses and the pump. Actually, there was one line on it with the suction tube and one line going over to that MCV valve on the other side, so both ends were disconnected. So I just went ahead and pulled it off. It's laying over on the floor. Now these are the two that go up to the side on the other side of the transmission. The one is a little valve block and the other one hooks onto a joint on the hose. So that's just going to sit there, and now we've got complete access to everything underneath. And I was trying to remember the last time that we did this. I remember leaving the cab jacked up until almost the very end, which is kind of not the way that I usually split them. Usually I lift the cab up at the very last, but I'm going to go ahead and reverse that. I'm going to lift the cab up now. That way I can go ahead and get these two hoses out from behind this cab support. I can get me just a little bit more room to reach a few of these lines up underneath. We're not terribly far off from getting her split. We just have to pull this, some people call it a bathtub. It's the little housing where the steering pump bolts on. We'll have to pull this shield off. Two bolts there and three underneath here, and then we'll pull the bathtub off. And that's not difficult at all. We just have to make sure that we get this rod as it comes down out of there. It's got to clear this little bump, and then the arm inside just has to pivot just a little bit to clear the housing. It's pretty simple, and I'll use the transmission jack for that one. That makes it really nice. Floor jack would work too, but not quite as a wide base, and it's a little bit more sturdy with the tranny jack. So anyway, let's go ahead and get that belly pump off, and then we'll look at it again. And there she is, out in her glory. Upon first inspection, this port is below the clutch. There's not supposed to be oil in there. So that tells me the IPTO seal is also smoked, leaking, whatever the case. Now those bolts are just the bolts around the perimeter here. I just throw them in here to keep them separate from other bolts as we keep going here. Let's look up inside real quick just for fun to see if we can see anything. Okay, what do we have? Anything in here worth noting? Well, other than the oil being in the clutch, no, not really anything noticeable yet. Alright, well, that's just for fun. I didn't figure we'd see anything. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and bust these bolts here on the bottom loose and remove those big bolts holding the cab down. They'll still be supported because we're not taking that bracket off yet. But that way we can go ahead and get the cab lifted up, and I'll put the stands right underneath the corners right here, just a little bit forward of center. And we're going to lift the cab about 2 inches here in the front. Okay, there you can see the stand. Just a 2x4 up above it. These are basement jack stands, nothing to them fancy. All they got to do is hold it up. Now there's our cab support removed. Here's what she looked like when she was up there. First you need to hook onto that with the big impact, and sometimes these little square flanges will be slightly stuck. I recommend trying to bust them loose before you lift the cab, because if that's stuck you're gonna have a hard time unthreading it. Anyway, go ahead and pull this bolt all the way out of that. Then you can pull these two bolts out of the middle there that are supporting the stand, and then I just throw it all back together so I don't lose the pieces. Chuck it out of the way. It's done. Now you can see we've got just a little bit more clearance now. And there's an extra washer in there. How about that? Anyway, so now I've got room to pull these big hoses out from behind that. Give us a little bit more breathing room. Those can just sit clear up here out of the way. Now, next up, we've got to remove these brake lines, unhook the electrical that goes out to the side. There's a bunch of grounds that go right here, and if I remember right, there's 4 of them, 4 ground wires, just thread into the back of the bell housing. This line going over to this direction, I forget exactly where it goes, if it's a brake supply hose or a brake pressure hose, I don't remember. But anyway, this line, the best way to do that one is to cut it with a brake line tool, and then it's a union that I put back in there. Otherwise, it's a real pain in the ass to get that line out. Maybe a guy could move the starter out of the way and lift the line up and over as the transmission comes out. But when you just cut it, then you can just remove the line. It just goes over to the other side. I don't remember what it does. We'll have to go over here and look. But anyway, just cut that line, guys. You can put it back in later. Remove this line, and I don't remember what else, but we'll see as we go. Disconnect the wires, and we're just about to the point where we can bungee strap everything up to the steering wheel and keep it out of our way. Okay, got most of these lines unhooked over here. Brake lines are all off. This one's been replaced. It's now a rubber line. This line, I found it goes over to that little riser on the other side. You can't see it from here. We'll look at it in a minute. I went ahead and fully removed the diff lock control valve. That thing's a real pain in the ass. This line threads up in the back of there, so I had to take it off so I could get to the back. I believe that's the supply line. And then that thing's a real pain in the ass. So anyway, we fully removed that. We have yet to unhook the park link, and that one's really simple. We're just going to go ahead and just pop it out of the hole right in there and leave it in park. That way the rear end can't move as we're rolling the front end away. Okay, pretty much everything on this side is now done other than the park link. Okay, let's go around the other side. Okay, that's the line that comes over that we cut, and see it would be just majorly difficult to get around. I've got these going ahead and loosen these guys up, both of these. This one's the supply line to the hydraulic seat. You see it fishes its way right up there. We're just going to pop it loose and stick it up in the cab. I went ahead and took these 2 off, and those 2 are also just going to be bungeed up into the cab out of the way. This one's going to get flexed around as we kind of fish it out. I've got to go ahead and remove this arm here for the TA that pulls on the valve, so we can get to the next line there and there. Just pull those 2 off quick. And to remove the TA cable, don't screw around with these dinky little suckers. Go in behind and get these 3/8 bolts out. They're a whole lot easier to work with. Okay. This big guy, we're just going to take it off so it's out the way. And then we'll take the shift linkage off, which is right there. You just barely see it back there and there. And it'll also get pulled up into the cab. So we're getting pretty close. There we go. Got all that crap out of the way. There's our shifter unhooked. TA cable's unhooked. Those 2 lines are off. The clutch linkage is unhooked. And I also went ahead and pulled these 2 lines off. They're just draped down here. They're completely unhooked from everything now. We'll just throw them over there out of the way. Fuel line is going to be a little different, guys, because he has removed his rear tank. You should have a pump right here. Pump and a filter. Basically just unhook your 2 lines off the front, the line off the rear, and then unscrew your pump and remove your pump out of the way. Nothing major. You don't have to do anything else with that. That's just fine the way it is. Okay, now let's go around the other side and then let's get the park linkage unhooked. There we go, out of the way. I don't have to take it off the back. I just remove it out of these 2. The top one is for the actual shift arm, and the bottom one is just for this horseshoe piece right there, just for that little horseshoe pin that goes back and actually hooks onto the park arm. Okay, now I went ahead and installed the rear housing handlers, they call it, or I just call it a rear housing stand. And we've got to get the front one stuck on the front half of the transmission. It bolts into these two holes. So they're looking kind of gummy in there. We'll get them cleaned out quick. We'll get that stand on, and a floor jack down underneath. You'll see that in a second, just to help support this rear end, because until we get the transmission unhooked, it will be rear heavy. Once we unhook the tranny, it will be front heavy. So that's what the front stands for. Okay. And there's the front stand. Now, I forgot to tell you, you have to pull this yoke off, that drive shaft right there, because, well, you have to drive the front end. I suppose you could stick a bar in there and turn it, but it's a whole lot easier just to grab a socket to fit that, which is 1 7/16 inches. Well, maybe your set doesn't have one. But anyway, mine, my stand doesn't allow that knuckle to rotate. So I have to pull it off anyway. So we're pretty well ready to go ahead and break it loose. I got a little bit of pressure on the front of that stand, and we'll put a little bit on the floor jack, just right here on the center, kind of give it just a little bit of lift. And we'll break it loose and start walking her forward. Okay, while that's dripping, I'm going to go up here and unhook the throttle linkage. Throttle linkage is the only thing under the hood that we have to disconnect. Water hoses, heater hoses, AC lines, everything will be long enough. So we're just going to pop these loose right here, loosen one of these up, and just pop it out. And it will pull itself most of the way up into about here. And then you can just reconnect it once you're done. Okay, as you can see, we're starting to split. And it's always good just to go slow so you don't, you know, if you forgot something, then you're not breaking something in half. Electrical, or well, I guess if you had a hose, you'd just be fighting yourself. So anyway, it's good to go slow. And we're pretty well okay over here. One thing I had to additionally do is right there on that's the park pivot. I had to go ahead and take that goofy looking two-eared thing off of there because it was rubbing on this big line. So I just went ahead and buzzed it out with the impact. Now, one other thing we have to do is remove these two lines. The others are fine. The supply and return are fine. Just the two lines going down to the alternating check valve, in case you didn't know what that was. So I'm just gonna put a zip tie around the one. I don't know what that is, a piece of dirt or something. Zip tie around with fitting on each one so I remember which way they go. And I can't remember if those two heater hoses, I know I don't have to unhook them, but I might have to pull the securing screws and fasteners off of that pillar of the cab. I can't remember, but I think I'm gonna have to because they're getting kind of snug. Not terrible yet. There's a little bit of flex in them, but they're going to be getting close. So I'll probably do have to go ahead and loosen up the screws on that, and that whole pillar of piping there can then just lean forward a little bit. All this stuff's already unhooked. Obviously, you have to unhook your air conditioner line and then your electrical connectors here at the front of the cab. You see the starter there is still in place, and we'll take that off after a while. All right, well, let me get those lines off of there and pull that pillar. Up, gotta go just a little bit more. It's basically out, but it's not gonna want to let me come out of there. I just need to go about another inch. Okay, so we pretty well got her split. Now the next thing to get this tranny off of the transfer case, there's 2 bolts, one on each side. Oops, right there. One on each side. Okay, obviously we got these 2 big ones here, big one there, and then there's one here and one directly on the other side, and then the 3 actually there's 4 big ones on the other side, just like these 3. Now again, there's 2 here, and these are long. They go all the way back into the transmission. 4 on the other side, 3 on this side, then these 2 big ones up top, and then you could pull that thing clean off the stand. Okay, here taking out the big bolts. We also have to remember to loosen up our tach sensor and basically just lift it up 1/4 of an inch and hold it there while you pull the transmission off. Easiest way to do that, guys, you stick a flathead screwdriver, ram it up underneath the side of it once you get the bolts loose, and that'll hold it up out of the way. Nothing major. And there we have it. She's hanging on the cherry picker. And you see that stand came right out with it, so now there's nothing underneath this rear housing, rear half of this tractor. It's all supported by the front. Okay. Now, this was just put in here, like I said, not even, maybe it might have been last fall, but I think it was this spring. And this, all this being soaking wet in here tells me either the sealing here is bad or the sealing there is bad, because it shouldn't be having any oil in this housing. Now, this is our TA, so we've got to get everything completely stripped out of this transmission, and that's going to be on the next video. So, hope you guys enjoyed the intuitive how to split an anteater video. And like I said, if you want to see how to change a TA, stick in for the next video, because that's what we're doing right now, is getting the TA replaced, swapping this one out. It's failed on the TA side, not the direct side. So, hang in there, guys, and hopefully we'll catch you on the next video. Thank you. Catch you later.